Hi all, I'm Sach Fernando from Melbourne One TV. We are a Melbourne-based multicultural online TV station. And today with me, I have a special guest, Mr. Yohan Ramasundara, all the way from Canberra, joining us through Zoom. Yohan has over 15 years of experience in the private, public, and also not-for-profit sectors, and currently he's the digital leader in public sector for GHD Digital, one of the leading professional services firms. Yohan is also the immediate past president of the Australian Computer Society, ACS, and also the current Secretary General of the Asia Pacific Forum for Information Communication Technology. So Yohan, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, Sach. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good. Is it cold over in Canberra?
It is absolutely freezing, but I'm glad I'm indoors and I've got heating on, but thinking about the poor people who are homeless sometimes, and then out there, I think we are very blessed.
Yeah, certainly. So Johan, have you been working from home these days, or going to office? Yeah.
Yeah, look, I have been working from home since the beginning of the pandemic, COVID-19.
Yeah.
It's with mixed results, but overall very positive. As with life, working from home and remote working has positives and negatives, but overall quite positive.
That's good to hear. Yeah, even for myself, I've been working from home for over 100 days, and I tend to like it, to be honest. I've grown used to it right now. But yeah, I'm thinking how would I go back to office and start getting to traveling every day. But like you said, that there are positives. We are saving a lot of time on travel too, so that's a good thing. Yeah, so let's start on a bit of your history. Like, when did you first come to Australia, and did you study here initially? Can you say a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I finished my year 12 in Sri Lanka, and after finishing year 12, I wanted to study IT. And obviously, in Sri Lanka, the options were quite limited. And I had my uncles and aunties here in Canberra. So my parents packed my bags and said, "You're going to Australia and you're going to Canberra." And that was in February 1999. So over 20 years ago, I came to this cold place called Canberra. I didn't quite like it initially, but after about 2-3 years, absolutely loved it. And to date, I think it's one of the best places to live on earth. Okay. And I came here to study IT, as I said, and I finished off my bachelor's of IT with an accounting and finance minor from University of Canberra.
Oh, so now I heard you mention your parents, pushed you to come to Australia. So was it your parents who told you to do IT, or was it your choice of yourself?
No, they're very pushy parents, as you can expect from most subcontinent parents are, but pushy in a good way, right? I mean, they always have the interest of their children at heart, but they never actually push me in any real direction. Just go in and say, you must become an engineer, you must become an IT person, or whatever else. But choosing IT was all up to me. I selected IT because around that time I could really see the computers taking off, and technology was really transforming the way that we were getting things done. So I really wanted to study and learn more about IT.
Yeah, wonderful. I think you did the right choice. You've achieved a lot in the IT industry in Australia. You certainly. So looking back at it, you think coming to Australia and, like, I'll ask this way: would you have achieved the same things in Sri Lanka if you had stayed in Sri Lanka, or you think it was probably the best choice you did coming over to Australia and pursuing a career here?
That's a tough one, Sach. It's just like living in parallel universes, right?
Yeah.
Look, I think if I was in Sri Lanka, I would have achieved something different because obviously you are a product of your environment and everything that happens. So if I'm the same person, and if I was doing my undergraduate degree in technology in Sri Lanka, it would have presented me with many other opportunities and different ones, of course. But I always believe that you got to create the future that you want to see. So I don't think it really would matter where I would have been studying. But certainly the opportunities that would have been presented to me would be totally different. So who knows, maybe I would be better off or worse off or still happy though
Exactly.
if I was elsewhere. So I think I have no regrets. I think I made the right call by coming to Australia, and it's one of the best places to be on earth right now, right? COVID-19 has certainly showed that we are quite lucky to be living in Australia and calling Australia home.
That's true. That's true. So, I'll stay in that area. So, for a migrant who, perhaps even say, for a person who wants to migrate to Australia, what advice or what would you tell them?
Well, it really depends. It's a really good question, but it really depends why they're migrating, right? So a lot of the time, people don't really understand. They go, right, such as going to Australia in Melbourne, Yohan's in Canberra, I might as well go there too. I mean, to me, that's not necessarily a really good why. You got to understand why. But if you really want to migrate and make a really good life here in Australia, certainly presents you with quite a lot of opportunities. So from that perspective, I think there are multiple opportunities for people to come in here. My advice to anybody, whether they migrate to Australia or whether they stay back in Sri Lanka or go to some other country, is doesn't matter what you do. I mean, these are fundamental values that I learned from my parents and elders growing up. Is my mum used to say, doesn't matter what you do, you make sure that you be really, really good at what you do, right? So let's say I am sweeping the floors. That's my job. If I'm sweeping the floor, I want to make sure that I am the best bloody sweeper of the floors, right? And if I'm doing IT, make sure you are the best at doing that particular thing. So, and especially in a country like Australia, if you do that, if you have the right work ethic, I think you're going to be recognized, and you'd be able to go and do and achieve a lot more, and make sure that you're able to have your dreams, fulfill your dreams, do whatever you like. There's so many things to do. Australia's a large country, presents you with abundant opportunities, right?
Yeah, certainly. And I certainly like your anecdote that you said, whatever you do, or the quote you mentioned, whatever you do, you have to do to the best of your ability. I think that's great advice for any listener. And all right, Yohan, thanks for that information before. I certainly agree with you on that. Whatever you do, you have to do to the best of your ability. Now, moving on to the education side of things, I know you're a well-educated person. You've got a degree. You took a degree at University of Canberra, and you've had a formal education. So what's your view on youngsters these days? Because normally, probably perhaps I'd say in the last 20 years or so, people wanted a formal education if you wanted to get a good job or a career. But it looks like things are changing right now. There's YouTubers coming up these days. There's different entrepreneurs. People can learn coding through online. So what's your view on how important, education for the future IT industry?
I think such education is extremely important. It has always been important, and it will always continue to be important. And until the day we die, we never stop learning. Right. True. So, but I think where you're getting to is how important is certain formal education. So education to me, let's say if you go to a school, the education to us is not just getting, let's say, skills about coding or skills about technology, skills about economics or accounting or whatever. It's also a full, complete package. It's about learning how to work with one another, learning about how to share things, share information. There are other life skills that you get by being in a school environment. So it's really important from that perspective. However, when you look at some of the other, let's say, after you finish year 12 and then go in and do a vocational education or a university course, those, I think, I feel like some of those haven't really evolved over time. We used to prepare hundreds of years ago children after finishing schools to go in and work in factories for a 8 to 5 job or whatever else. But that is no longer the case. People don't really work in assembly lines. It's a different world. And like you correctly pointed out, the ways for people to gain that knowledge, there are multiple ways. Before, you had to go to X, Y, and Z university or whatever place and see this particular expert, and they were the limited sources of that skill, that knowledge. Now, multiple, a plethora, you're inundated with ways that you could do that. And if the university and that vet sector doesn't really evolve to make it a lot more interesting and adding more value to the people going through those systems, certainly it's going to be outdated. And we've already seen few tech companies coming out and saying, look, we don't look for university degree qualifications anymore. We just look at the competency of people, and if they can code in Python, we are happy with it. But like I said, those organizations present you with a lot more opportunities than just that education, formal education. It's just those intangible things, those soft skills that you gain by participating in their curriculum that I think some of the other means can't really provide.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, I mean, currently, so in your opinion, you think the current system perhaps does not teach all those values that you're talking about? There needs to be change?
So what I'm saying, Sach, is the current system is not optimal enough. So there's a lot of room for it to be improved, and a lot of room for it to actually look at contemporary ways of giving that education. And also, it's no longer a one-size-fits-all. So for all that matters, say, Sach might be really good at absorbing the information and learning quite quickly. So why do you have to move at the same pace as, let's say, Yohan? Say, I might be the slowest person in the class. Why do you have to move at the same pace as me? Or why do you have to move at the same pace as the median, and then compromise your progress, and then I will be left behind if I'm the slowest person, etc. So why can't we have a more tailored approach where individuals, more flexible, so individuals can move at their own pace within a certain framework, obviously, and then still get the same outcome, and then be making sure that they are still able to be successful in life, but they're all going on about it the way that they are best positioned, because we know no two human beings are the same. We're all unique. So I think it's really important that the education system evolves to give contemporary education at a pace that is convenient and through methods that are a lot more appealing to individual needs.
So the word kind of stuck in my head when you said evolving. Australia currently, the higher education system, people end up with a debt after their university degree, and some people will even struggle to find a job. Is that something that needs to be changed? Perhaps should a free education within a framework, should it be introduced in Australia, in your opinion?
Yeah, look, I am a big believer in certain rights of individuals, right? So I believe education is a fundamental human right.
Mm-hmm.
But I also understand everything has a cost attached to it. So,
Mm-hmm.
but from a higher education perspective,
Yeah.
I think we are no longer, Australia is no longer running its own race. We are not closed ecosystems
Mm-hmm.
anymore. We are all a global village.
Yeah.
So when you or your children such are competing for the jobs of the future, they are
Yeah.
competing with the global talent.
Mm-hmm.
And what you don't want is at the beginning of the race to make sure that your children are not having a debt, huge debt, even before they get off the tracks,
Yeah.
compared to some of the Nordic countries and
Mm-hmm.
others who have a free education. I think what we should do is we should really, certainly I'm not advocating for greater um, uh, um, increase in taxes or anything like that. But what I would like to do is to see that we are being more efficient and we are prioritizing our investment
Yeah.
into health and education. And
Yeah.
by doing so, we are able to offer all Australians
Mm-hmm.
free higher education. And why not? And we need to certainly do that a lot more in this, knowledge economy, which is more
Mm-hmm.
intangible based. So it's no longer the tangibles that are only adding value. It's also the intangibles. And what you
Yeah.
know here is going to be really certainly
Really
going
important.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely going to give you that heads up when you're
Mm.
competing with the others from
Mm.
around the world.
That's true. So, I mean, you are sort of putting a lot of emphasis on education, and you are saying it's good and it has to evolve. Now, I've also seen in the technology industry, people have been doing lots of startup. There are a lot of entrepreneurs nowadays, but a fact that I've read in a lot of places is that perhaps not all the startups succeed. There is a rate of failure, perhaps even close to 80%. What are your thoughts on that? Like, you think lack of professional or formal education plays a role in that, or it could be a vast amount of reasons? For example, not having a good business plan or a business model.
So, such I think your research is right. There's quite a lot of startups that fail, and there are multitude of reasons for that failure. But it's no different to a business. If you set up a little shop outside of your house and start selling lemonades or whatever else, failing or succeeding. So
Yeah.
the important thing is, like you said, having a right business model. So quite a lot of the startups fail because they are quite passionate about something, and they
Mm-hmm.
just simply blindly follow that passion, and you think that you know the customer, you think you
Mm-hmm.
know the solution without
Yeah.
actually understanding the
Yeah.
customer and the need. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really important that you look at what the actual customer problem that you're trying to solve.
Yep.
Is there a demand for it? Are people willing to pay for it? Do you
Mm-hmm.
have the right skills, or do you have the
Mm-hmm.
right skills around you?
Yeah.
And is the market right? Is the timing right? Because sometimes it could well be that you're ahead of the market, or you're behind the market.
Yeah.
And do you have enough cash flow to really not just start it up, but then scale it up and take it to the next level? Do you have the right advice? Education certainly plays a part. But where I've seen people who are really successful is not just purely be having all of them, but also their ability, their tenacity, their ability to follow through. And
Mm.
when one challenge is,
Yeah.
presented, their ability to actually go, okay, well, that didn't work out. Let me pivot. Let me do something else. Let me try and ask the customer again, and then really learn about the niche product that they're actually taking out to the market, and making sure that they're actually making a difference. And again,
Yeah.
it's not all about profit. There are other startups who are there for social impact and whatever else. So you've got to constantly evolve, constantly check, constantly have that mindset where you're willing to change, and also it's a risk taking, and quite a lot of the people are not successful because they're risk averse, or sometimes you take too much risk. So it's a fine balance, and I say this to many people that I mentor in the startup world. It's just like making sure that you have the right ingredients. If you're making if you're following a recipe to make let's say a pudding of some sort, you got to make sure that you put the right ingredients, you have the oven at the right temperature, creating all the right environment, take it out at the right time, etc. And then you could just simply present it, or you can present it in a nice flashy way, like Apple presents their products, etc. So there's a lot to it, rather than just simply having an idea, and quite a lot of the people don't do anything about it. So an idea is worthless. It's worth zero if you actually don't execute it. And then even when you execute it, you've got to make sure that you execute it with the right business model that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, while we're on that point, I'd like to also ask, there are a lot of youngsters these days, they want to, do their own startup. They have a lot of fresh ideas these days, because most of them have been involved in this era of technology, the digital age. So what's the advice you can give to those youngsters who want to perhaps even pursue a career in IT, or, start up their own company? What's the advice with your experience? Because I know you've had over 15 years of experience being in the IT industry.
So I think technology is a really exciting industry to be in. And technology, not just in itself, is an industry, but we augment other industries. We help other industries to be more efficient, more effective, and therefore I think technology is an amazing industry to be in. So if anybody wants to get into industry, into the tech industry, I'll say absolutely. Why didn't you do that yesterday? But it's not too late. Come in, join today, if not tomorrow. And we have a huge shortage. I know from the Australian data that we are really short of good technology professionals. So you're never going to be short of a job. The other one is, if you look at all the higher paying jobs, most of the higher paying jobs involve a technology component. And that's now. Soon, all the higher paying jobs are going to involve technology. And if you're going to going to have your own tech-driven startup, it's never been easier, right? Back in the day, for people to have their own startup, it required quite a lot of overheads. But now all you need is access to a laptop, power, good internet and software, and where you go. I mean, I'd recommend some water and food and, hugs and love as well, because it's not always rosy. Things always don't go according to plan. But certainly what technology has done is cut down the barriers to entry. So therefore, a lot more people can have their own startup, internet-based startup, and really make their mark if they have that clarity in their business model, understand their product or service that they really want to take to market. I think they can. Almost anybody could be successful.
Yeah, certainly great advice, Yohan. I do agree with you. Great advice for the youngsters. I think it is evolving, and certainly there's a lot of scope, like you said. So thanks for that advice. So I'd like to now move on to the COVID-19, the pandemic that we've been facing these days. I know Australia, not only Australia, the whole world, it's evolved and it has responded quite positively, through technology. What's your view on that? Can we improve on it, or do you think we've done a really good job that we can be satisfied with what we've achieved?
That's a tough one, Sach, because I think there's always room for improvement, right? But we can also be content. We could also look back and go, wow, we did a bloody brilliant job. I mean, from an Australian context, I think we've done a really, really good job in so far containing COVID-19, as well as using technology to make sure that we continue business. So Australian businesses, most of them have shown how resilient they are, because whether it's a startup, whether it's a 100-year organization or older, we understand, the world's not just going to go on in a straight line the same way. There's always going to be ups and downs. And this was a huge shock, unlike a recession that you can probably see some marks of, look, we are going into a recession. But when a pandemic like this hit, it comes quick, it comes really fast, and the impact is huge, and there are a lot of unknowns. And I thought, from considering all of that, Australia handled it really well. Australian IT industry responded extremely well, and people have responded well. Not to say there haven't been any casualties, it's really sad, but they have shown resilience, and for that, I'm very proud. But if something like this happens again, I'm sure we have the learnings to make sure we do it even better.
That's the other thing I think I wanted to point out. Now we know we face COVID-19 currently, but how are we going to face the post-COVID-19 era? Now, in the last few months, maybe a lot of companies have used a lot of digital tools to enhance make it more efficient. So you think, will it be business as usual, how it was in the last couple of months, or will they start changing, or will they introduce new tools or digital tools to even further accelerate this digital transformation era?
So certainly, Sach, the smart businesses have been able to make full use of the digital suite, and quite a lot of the organizations have been able to bring back some of the digital transformation agendas that they put in the back burner, because that digital has been the only way or the main way they were able to continue with their businesses. So them to then go back and say, no, I don't think this is required anymore, I think it will be short-sighted. Again, the smart businesses would be able to create a new normal, not actually go back to the old ways of doing it, but create a new normal, which I would say is a hybrid. Wouldn't be, I don't think that we should just communicate online only, for example. I would love to be in the studio with you and then the others and do the recording. I mean, that's a lot more personal to me. And now I'm showing my age as a Gen X, Gen Y person, and the Gen Zs might disagree.
I'd say you look quite young, to be honest, on the computer screen.
but I think when you look at some of the offsets, right? So I didn't have to fly over to you, so less carbon emissions. I've been able to stay home, so no real commuting time, etc. And it's a lot more efficient. So I think you got to be able to find that balance. And I think the new normal is going to be a blended approach where that blend could change from one business to another, but in whichever case, there's going to be that increased digital component, and digital is here to stay, and I don't think it's going to go away.
So, I mean, when you think of, I know what you're saying, it has to, they have to, like, perhaps we'll say a small or medium-sized business entrepreneur, they need those digital tools to evolve. But if they're a small or a medium-sized business, you got to then weigh up the cost of using digital tools. You think it's a challenge, or in future, to make those accessible for smaller businesses? Because sometimes, you can't pay thousands of dollars if it's a small business for a digital tool.
Yeah, look, but the good news is, it used to be thousands of dollars, but now what we're seeing is the cost of those tools are coming down and down and down. Now it's hundreds, if not tens, and in some instances it's in a sense and or a per use basis, etc. So the tools have never been this accessible, and they're going to be even more accessible. And you've probably heard of the fourth industrial revolution, which is the convergence of digital world, the physical world, and the biological world. And that convergence is going to happen more and more rapidly. And that means we and the successful businesses need to be able to use the best of the physical world, the digital world, the biological world, all of that, if they want to be relevant in the new world. So it's really important. And like I said, I think it's never been accessible, and digital is here to stay.
Certainly, I think we all agree on that. You know, even for us today's day and age, you know, I can't survive without a phone, right? Even for you, there's meetings coming up, everything's in a phone, it's digital. We do the meetings today in Zoom. You know, it's been so easy. But I guess, you know, sometimes we could also face challenges, you think? What sort of challenges you think personally, as an IT industrial, as a tech person, would face in future?
Look, I think there's always a balance in anything, right? So I am all for use of technology for getting a better outcome or getting to the outcome quicker. So technology in itself is not a solution. It is what we really want to achieve that actually makes a difference. So if you overuse it, it could damage your eyes. I mean, we are forever looking into these screens, and that, you know, that's not really good for our eyes. And who knows, maybe over hundreds and millions of years, us humans may evolve, or there might be better screens or other ways we could actually interact, etc. I mean, sitting down in chairs aren't very good either. So technology presents with us with opportunities, but overuse of anything is not good. But in terms of tech professionals, what challenges they would face, I don't think, if provided they're able to keep a learning mindset and they continually able to adapt to the changing landscape that technology presents, I think you shouldn't have any problem. In fact, you would have quite a lot of opportunities. But if you're not able to do that, I mean, people ask, you know, what sort of IT people would lose their jobs? And I keep saying the only IT people, only tech people who would lose their jobs are the people who wouldn't be able to work alongside technological advances like, let's say, artificial intelligence, right? You can't just say, oh, look, AI is here or robots are here and I don't want to work with them. That's fine. You know, that's a choice. But you need to be able to, in a converged world, you need to be able to work with technology rather than working against technology. So technology certainly, like I said earlier, has the ability to augment what we are doing. So we need to go, I mean, before we had machines, I mean, even in some countries, right, developing countries, you might still see people farming using quite a lot of, you know, human resources or using animals or whatever else. And that's absolutely fine. But if you can have a more efficient machine to do that, it saves the human to actually do more value added, more higher order activities. So technology presents that to the workforce. So you can actually focus on other things that really matters, that requires human intervention, and let the machines and technology do what they're really good at.
Yeah, true. Certainly agree. You know, one thing that kind of popped up, you know, I read, you know, last, I think 2-3 days ago, the issue with security. You know, the information, because today's day and age, you know, with everything, we're using a lot of digital tools, which means our information is over there. So you think that's a challenge that, you know, the industry itself needs to sort of face or have frameworks in place so that people's information will not be thrown out everywhere?
I think certainly privacy is a big issue if you don't manage it properly. You're absolutely right. Once when you have a digital footprint, unlike in the physical world, it's very hard to erase. It's almost there for life. So how do we try and make sure that personal information and data is protected and privacy, levels of privacy is maintained? So like I said, in a converged world, legal systems haven't really kept up to date. So legislation in most instances are way behind the technology. So by the time that, for example, let me use an example. Let's say Facebook, and there were quite a few allegations against Facebook, and then what people are now saying is, look, let's try and regulate that sort of industry. But then you got to find that balance, because if you regulate something now, what it does is it stops other people from entering, because there are barriers to entry. But we didn't have the same barrier for others when they entered. So you got to find that, and our legislation is based on physical world dilemmas, not really looking at the digital world. So if I come in and let's say if I have somebody coming in and stealing something from my house, the consequences for that person is greater compared to somebody who steals my data, which is also an asset in the cyberspace. So how do we make sure that we reconcile that? So certainly the lawmakers have to pick up the pace and try and be ahead of the game, if not keep up with the pace.
True. Yeah, I mean, there's always the risk of having those privacy issues, but like you're saying, we need that legal or the legislation framework in place so that we can mitigate or perhaps even reduce the impact.
There are circumstances, because I was lucky enough to be in Israel a couple of years ago, and then what I saw there was I was saying, I had the pleasure to go to Israel, and what I found in my visit to Israel a couple of years ago is over there they don't really care too much about privacy, and that's because they have traded privacy for security. So over there they call themselves an island, although they're not technically an island, because they are surrounded by neighbors who are not necessarily very friendly at times with them, and then obviously some part by the sea. So what the Israelis have decided is, yes, privacy is important. However, they have accepted that it is almost non-existent in their environment, because in order to make sure that their security is heightened, they've decided to forego off that. Now, we are lucky in Australia, we don't have such a situation, and we believe that privacy is very important, and again, a right of the individuals. So therefore, I think it's extremely important that we don't let it get slipped away. We find the right balance. Again, there's no real hard and fast rule. It's very hard to have a hard and fast rule about those things. It's just like sometimes some of the cultures, right? I mean, in some cultures, it's okay to, you have to actually cover your full self up when you're walking down the street. In some cultures, it's okay to go down the street in a bikini, or sometimes nothing at all too. And it's accepted, so that those accepted norms are different. So, but coming back to the Israeli experience, it was fascinating how that sort of situation has enabled such a small country to be risk-taking,
Mm-hmm.
rather innovative,
Mm-hmm.
and they're absolutely amazing education system that they've got
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yep.
And there are quite a lot of lessons that we can certainly, any country, any economy, any individual can learn from them.
I see. Yeah. Now, valuable information. I certainly did not know that Israeli had a bit of an open privacy rule where, so what you're saying is everyone's personal information is accessible for the Israeli government.
Yes, they have made a decision to
Yeah.
make certain information accessible to government. Not
Yeah.
all personal information as such,
Yeah.
but however, they understand that any information that you put on the World Wide Web
Yeah.
is not protected, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
share our
That's good.
photos and everything else on Facebook. I used to tell one of my friends who was oversharing some of the details. I said, would you put the same photo outside of your house and stick it onto the wall, so that people who are walking past can see those photos?
Yeah.
And they said, oh no, I won't do that. And I said, well, that's what you're doing, but not doing it physically, but you're doing it digitally, right? So that people can see. So
exactly.
if you're proud of sharing something, by all means certainly do that, but you don't want to be doing something that you think you shouldn't be doing in the physical world, in the digital world. And so you just got to make sure you think of it that way.
The balance, I guess, it comes back to that point you made earlier. Of using technology, not overusing, but using within
Correct.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely, and for what purpose? That's the thing. So you all got to always understand, why are we doing this? For what purpose are we doing it? And then technology, like I said, is just it's just an enabler. It helps us to get there, but it's not an answer in itself.
Yeah, true, certainly. Yeah, thanks for that valuable information, Yohan. Let's get back to your hobbies. I heard you are an international umpire.
I was. I have umpired been lucky enough to umpire a few international games. Yeah, it's been a great 16-year career. But now, like I said, getting old, all the grey hairs coming out, can't see properly, and no, it's mostly because all the other things had to be prioritized. So work, life, and other engagements had to take a priority, and that meant I had to let go of my umpiring about 3 years ago. But it's certainly been a great short 16-year career.
So in your 16-year career, who's been the toughest player? Like, how in some games there are people who are like shouting at the umpire saying, arguing and then complaining you didn't give the out for the LBW. Who has been the toughest player in your time, you reckon?
I don't actually consider anybody to be a tough player as such.
Yeah.
I mean, there are certainly some characters who would go after a lot more of the decisions than others. But I think it's a matter of once when you get to know them, they also understand where the boundaries are, right? So when you're umpiring at the great levels and the non-televised games, you can't really fall back on DRS, and you can't just go refer to the third umpire.
Yeah.
So you're reliant on your skill. And certainly there's been a couple of instances where I'm the only person who didn't hear that snick to the keeper, and the batsman obviously knew it, the non-striker knew it, my colleague at square leg knew it, and I didn't know that. There's been a couple of those sort of instances, but not many. But what happens is those people that you said are either over appealing or are really competitive, they also understand where you are and how good or bad you are. I reckon if I was a bad umpire, I would actually have those sort of people all over me all the time. But luckily for me, I wasn't a bad umpire. I was a reasonably good umpire. So therefore, even those players go right. They used to call me Yowie. They said, "Oh, Yowie, no, he's reasonable. He's a good umpire. He would have given it out if that was the case." And then they are able to move on. And there's certainly a man management component that is there in umpiring. It's not all about standing still and putting your finger up or not. There's a lot more to it than that. So I was able to bring in my learnings from the professional life, my school life, and everything else, and leadership skills and all that to the field, as well as learnings from that, taking that back to my day job and my social life and everything else. So I have been lucky enough. I can't really pinpoint to somebody and say, look, that guy is really bad, or that girl is really bad. They've all been really good. Sometimes some people can be a little bit competitive on the field, but you get off the field and they're the nicest blokes. And you got to understand, at the higher levels, they're not just playing for having fun. They are playing for their profession, their livelihood. And so there's a lot more at stake, and you got to respect that. And you got to lift your game up and to make sure that you do a really good job.
Thanks a lot, Yohan. So one last question. So you have been living in Australia for over 20 years now? So if there's a game between Sri Lanka and Australia, who do you go for?
Look, I have to say I've got so many friends in the Australian cricket team, and they would actually not let me come back home if I don't go for them. But not just because of that, I know them reasonably well. So I've seen them come up through the ranks, through the junior ranks, and second 11 games, first 11 games, and now playing for Australia. So they're my friends. So Nathan Lyons is from Canberra, and I know him. Mitch Stark is from Sydney, and know him through the ranks there. And there are many others. Maxi from Melbourne, where you're from, is a really, really nice person and a great cricketer. So when those guys are playing, my heart's with them to go for them. If you look at it as a country, I think Sri Lankan cricket is going through some challenges at the moment, in a rebuilding phase, and hopefully they'll be able to learn from all that and be able to be more competitive again. And I really love the attitude that the Australian cricketers bring to the game. They play hard, but they play fair. They always understand where the boundaries are. They play within the boundaries. Sometimes you might say they're pushing the boundaries, but you have to. You're not just you are playing a competitive game. So you've got to make sure, and you're playing to not winning at any cost, but you're playing to win, and you're representing your country. So there's a huge responsibility on their shoulders, and they do a brilliant job, and they're an exemplar for many other countries to really look and study and learn from.
Well, certainly, yes. And Yohan, thank you very much for your precious time. We greatly appreciate. We thank again, and hopefully we can have another chat later in the year, and we can chat how we've progressed through COVID-19 and look back at how the technology industry, certainly in Australia, have they done. Thanks again, and we've had a good discussion with Yohan Ramasundara, and thank you again. Thanks from Melbourne One TV, and we'll be off. Thank you.
Thanks, Serge.
Thank you, Yohan.